Hey, welcome back to A2 Audio. Today on the channel, I went ahead and started without you guys, but then I got to thinking I should make a video about this. And so Greg, who let me restore his Harman Kardon 930, gave me his 730, and I'm going through and doing the same thing with this one. So I'm going to kind of go through it and probably do a mostly recap, make sure there's no problem transistors in it, replace the lighting with all LEDs, and then I'll make sure I do the DC offset and idle current. I'm not sure if they have both of those adjustments, but I'll do my best to get that done. And then I'm going to build a custom case for it. And so there's a couple neat things about this already. And so I want to bring you guys in closer, and we'll go ahead and show you some of the things that are a little different on this receiver than some other ones. So come on in. So one of the first things I noticed as soon as I started working on this was the different design on the faceplate. And so the original, the 930, had chrome all the way around this. But this thing actually has chrome accents, and they just screw off. So on each side, the left and right side, these just both come off. And so that might actually help me because I'm supposed to be making a custom case for this. And so that may give me some leeway in my design element, but I'm not too sure yet if that's what that's going to do. So I thought that was pretty neat that these completely come off and they're detached from the original faceplate. Another cool thing about this receiver is how the amp board and the amp board heatsink is in the unit itself. So I'm going to bring you guys in a little bit closer. And so it's going to be hard for you guys to see, but when we look in here, this heatsink is attached by 4 screws, 2 on this side and 2 back on this side. And so after you unscrew those 2 things, well, guess what? If you want access to this, this actually has quick disconnects here, and this entire assembly is removable from the stereo. And so once we get that off, guys, all we have to do is unscrew these screws that are connecting the output transistors to the sockets on the amp board itself, and that'll give me full access to the back of this board. And so looking at this board, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 electrolytic capacitors, and we have quite a few transistors. Now I don't know if I'm going to touch the transistors on this or not. I may take a peek at a couple of them and see if I've got substitutions with modern equivalents, and if I do, maybe I'll start changing out some of those. But this is a completely working unit, so it doesn't have any problems right now. So it looks like we've got our adjustments here, our variable resistors for some kind of adjustment, but I only see one set. So it leads me to believe that we're not going to be able to do the DC offset, that maybe all we'll be able to do is the idle current or vice versa. I haven't taken a look at the service manual yet. So if it's like the 930, I had to plug and chug resistors in order to get the DC offset as close to 0 as possible. But we'll take a look at that as we go there. So I'm not going to do an encompass video on this, guys, because y'all have seen me change capacitors before, but anything that I find unusual on this receiver, I'm going to go ahead and point out, and then I'll also do like a wrap-up video telling you what I did to the unit, and then I may do an FM alignment on this, and if I do, I think that'll be beneficial because the 930 was a beast to do it on. You can tell that this model came out after the 930 because of the circuit board designs, and the layout is a lot more convenient, a lot more well thought out, and the circuit boards are better designed as well. So I'm hoping this will be a lot easier to do. So from there, so we may do an FM alignment, and if I do, I'll show that on the video. We're going to obviously check these filter caps, and then I don't know what this is. Maybe this is for the phono, I'm not sure. I haven't had a chance to look at all these boards yet, but we'll go ahead and probably recap that. It does look like it's something because it's you can see the left and right channel on it, so maybe it is the phono. I don't know, but we're going to take a look at that. Well, like I said, we'll redo the lighting on this, and so this is already a working unit, so we're just going to make it better, and then we're going to do a custom case for it. So I'm going to take you guys out, and then I'm going to get started on this amp board. All right, guys, so here we are. I've gone ahead and I removed this, as you saw in the previous video, and I was able to rebuild this board, and so I replaced all the electrolytic capacitors on this, and I went ahead and replaced all the transistors on the main amp board as well. And then I refreshed the seal pads and thermal compound and all the output transistors and remounted it. I just tested this for about 30 minutes I wanted to make sure that my transistor subs were going to work without any problems, and it sounds amazing. Honestly, I cannot believe how great this little receiver sounds for the amount of power it puts out. And it's just, I'm very, very impressed. So if you're rebuilding this, I would suggest going to Audio Karma. There's a good thread on there that talks about this amp board, and I guess this was used in one of the amps that Harman used, and then also this board was very similar to a lower brand stereo that was put in a Montgomery Ward stereo that was used as well. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. Be careful when you do go to that site. They have the transistor substitutions on there, but I found a couple of their substitutions I thought they probably would have worked, but were not the best choice in my opinion. And so I went a little bit differently than the transistors that they recommended to substitute out. And I think, honestly, I think mine's better, because that's why I did it. So, and that's why I tested it just now as well, just to ensure that there were no issues and whatnot. And it really had to do with really 4 transistors in particularly that I changed up. And really it had to do with the complementary pair of PNP to NPN, and then also the feedback transistor. They suggested a transistor that wasn't in the same package size. That would have been different and would not have mounted correctly to this heatsink here. Now, I guess theoretically, if you wanted to use the transistor that they suggested, it could have worked. I think they wanted to use a KSC 2690, but you would have had to probably have drilled a hole here and then tapped it and then screwed directly into this. And so I wanted to keep it original as much as possible. And so I use a different transistor, one that is also used in the realistic STA 2100s as a feedback transistor. And so if you remember, that transistor is kind of attached to the heat sinks of the amp boards themselves in the complementary right and left channels. And it was the exact same package size as what these transistors were originally. And I know they've been used for that feedback loop before, and so that's what I decided to use. And so I was able to use the same mounting hardware and aluminum bracket to secure it to these heat sinks, and so that worked really well. And so that transistor that I used was a KSC 2383, and I think that worked perfectly, and it looks original. And so like I said, I wanted to stick as close to original as possible. So this amp board is ready to rock and roll. So I think now I'm going to move on to the EQ amp or phono board. And so if you look here closely, you can see that there's a lot of stuff on top of this board. And this is where the vents for the original case were. And so you can kind of see it on this capacitor back here too. And so that's obviously what was open to the elements, and that's where stuff fell into the thing. And so just food for thought. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to replace all the electrolytic capacitors and transistors on this board as well. I've already figured out what my substitutions are going to be, and as far as I know, there's no problems with this board, but the customer, Mr. Greg, wanted me to do a thorough go through, so I think that's going to be my next. I want to make sure that this doesn't have any problems for the record player or the phono down the road, and so we're going to go ahead and tackle that next. And so let's see, we got 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, looks like 10 capacitors and 6 transistors that we'll be replacing on this board. And so it looks like the way to get this off is you've got some plastic grommets here that this holds in this side of the board, and then there's a kind of like the amp board where it has a little connection here to this board. And so I think if I remove this, I think this whole board will come out. Looks like it's soldered on with 2 wires here, and so I may unsolder those wires, and maybe this whole board will come out, and that'll just make it that much easier for me to take and replace those components. So let me go ahead and see if I can get this board out, and if I can, I'll show you guys what it looks like once I have it out. All right, so I got those grommets and popped those out, and so it's actually attached by a couple more wires back here. So I'm not going to unsolder these because I have pretty good room here. What I may do is I may go ahead and pull this assembly back out, because then I can lay that board all the way over and have some extra room for my hand. So note to whoever's doing this, if you're restoring this, Once you get done doing the amp board, just go ahead and leave that out. That way you have full access to this phono board here. You don't have to take this back out. You could definitely do it. I mean, you've got enough leeway here to where you could get to the assemblies. So I may leave it in, I may take it out. But just FYI, you have pretty good access to get to all the components on this board. And so nothing too important to note here. One thing I did notice, and it may be hard to see, let's see if I can get a good picture of it. Let me zoom in. Right up here, you'll see that there's two resistors kind of put in series. So I guess they didn't have the right value and they made a resistor. Now I don't know if this was done in the factory or if that was done by somebody after the fact, but I'm going to leave it in there. Those are old resistors, so if it was done a while ago, and there's no problems with this, so it's working. So I'm not going to mess with that. So when we get back, I should have this done, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so we went ahead and we rebuilt the phono/EQ board, and so I went ahead and changed all the capacitors and the transistors. And so it's probably a good thing we went ahead and did this, because out of the 10 capacitors on the board, 6 of them were definitely out of range, reading with high ESRs, and then 2 of them had their capacitance was pretty far off. Transistor wise, let's go back to the capacitors real quick. So there was 4 of these capacitors you may have noticed earlier that were bright blue, and some people would recommend to change those into film capacitors. I'm not of that mindset. If I have the film capacitors and I got a bunch of them, maybe I'll do it. But electrolytics are fine. They're electrolytic and polarized electrolytics that were originally in there. So I go ahead and I change them with electrolytics, and I've never had a problem doing that. Now, you know, like I said, if you got film capacitors, you can do it. X-Ray Tony did a really good video about that, talking about the differences between film and electrolytic capacitors, and how when these circuits were designed, they were designed for electrolytic capacitors. So changing them to film may actually change some of the characteristics of the circuit itself. So I think it's a good idea to put back what was in there. As far as the transistors, every single one of these transistors had transistor rod on them, where the black starts to creep up on the legs, which is really weird because on the amp board, none of them had it. So I don't know if that was because this is where the vents were, and this was just open. But when I look on the tuner board down here, I see that same stuff on these transistors as well. So I don't know if it's a characteristic of the transistor itself, how it's made, or what that leads it to be more susceptible to that. But I just thought that was worth mentioning. So as you can see, I did go ahead and remove the amp board and the heatsink. It just made it a lot easier for me to work on and get access to the board, so I could flip the board completely over. And so it made it a lot more accessible for me to get to this board. So I'm going to go ahead and put that back together. I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick test, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do next. Okay, here we're on the bottom of the receiver, and a couple things to point out here. One, we have our filter caps down here, and I went ahead and tested all the filter caps, and every single one of them are actually right on spec, almost perfect, which is pretty awesome because I didn't want to have to replace those. So I'm glad they were all within spec. Not just within spec, I mean like right on the money, so clearly some good caps there. The other thing to point out is this board up here, and so in the manual they call this the sub-rectifier PC board, but in actuality it's just really another part of the power supply. So there's really got 4 capacitors on here and then 1 transistor. And so to get access to this board, I think all I'm going to have to do is remove this screw, and then there's another screw right here, and hopefully that will release this to come out, and then that way I can get access to the bottom of this board and change those out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. When we come back, I'll let you know if that's how I had to get it out. On a side note, I just got done testing the receiver now that we redid the phono board, played a record, sounds great, so no issues there. All my transistor substitutions and capacitors were fine. So this thing's coming right along. This has been a much more of a pleasure to work on than the 930. The engineers did a much better job making this a little more workable, and the circuit board designs. You know, you can tell this is a later series because the circuit boards are a little bit better designed. I will say that these circuit boards still have pretty thin traces and solder points, so you really have to be careful not to apply too much heat for too long on these because they are pretty delicate and you can mess up the board. Not the end of the world if you do that. You can easily repair it, but just FYI if you're in here unsoldering. So let me go ahead and I'll do that off camera and I'll report back once we've got that complete. All right, team, so ran into a slight problem, but I think I have it fixed, so I'm going to show you guys. So a couple things. This board, all the places where the electrolytic capacitors go, there are no labeling, so you don't know which side is the positive and which side is the negative. So if you're doing this work, make sure when you pull it out that you notate on the board which side is the positive side of the capacitor and negative side that's going into the board. Like I said, the board has no markings whatsoever, so I went ahead and notated that as I was pulling the capacitors out. But also, if you don't know, you could look in the service manual, but it really doesn't have a great picture in there, so just be careful when you're doing that because you don't want to put these in reverse the polarity and have a problem. The second thing I ran into is that there's one transistor on this board, and it sits on this heatsink, and it's a 2SC1162. And so as you can tell, maybe you can't, but this has got the resistor rod on it. So black-legged, transistor rod. This has got the black-legged transistors. And so I really couldn't find a good substitution for this. And so this pinout on this transistor is ECB. And so I don't have one that has the current rating, collector current, that I need. And I had a hard time finding them. I've ran into this before with this particular pinout. So I'm kind of going to do my own transistor substitution here. And I'm going to use the 2334. And so this is very similar as far as power rating, a little bit better, higher amperage, and then also a little bit better heat protection, or heat dissipation, I guess I could say. The problem is the pinout on this one is BCE, so I can't put this in the board and have it hooked up to this heatsink. So what I think I'm going to do is there was a screw right here that holds this board in behind it. So I think I'm going to move that transistor to here and then run wires to connect into this board. And obviously that's super overkill for this as far as heat dissipation goes for this board, and it's going to be much robust and should not cause any problems. But in order to do that, I want to point out two things. And so let me zoom in. So before I can do that, I need to put a sleeve on this transistor, and that's to ensure that the screw does not contact this metal backing and cause a short. And then after I do that, I need to make sure that I put a seal pad behind this, and then I can attach it here. If you don't do that, you're going to have one heck of a short and probably have quite a few sparks and probably really mess something up. So if you decide to do this modification, make sure you do those two things before you do it. That's really the only way I can see getting a new transistor here and then getting it attached to something. In all honesty, I think I could probably just put this resistor in here, not attached to any heatsink, because the heat dissipation on this transistor, hopefully I haven't been saying resistor this whole time, on this transistor is much higher than what the original one was. So I think I could probably get away with that, but I don't want to risk it. So I'm going to go ahead and use the frame as my heatsink. And so very important, before you do that, put the sleeve through the hole in the transistor, and then also make sure you put your seal pad on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to attach a couple wires to the legs of the transistors, and then I'll run them back and plug them into this board, and I'll heat shrink over the legs of the transistor just to make sure that we have some added protection there, and then we'll test it out and make sure we don't have any problems. So let me go ahead and do that. I'll show you guys what it looks like when I'm done, and then I'll just double check it, play the stereo for a little bit, and ensure that we're not going to have any problems. So I'll be back. All right, so I think that's going to work out good. So as you can tell, I've got my transistor here, and I've made sure to put my seal pad behind it, and then also my sleeve to insulate the screw from the frame, and got that all tightened up. I put a heat shrink over the legs and ran the wires into the board, obviously making sure that we get the pin out correct so we don't have any problems there. I decided I was going to keep the heat sink on the board as well, so if anybody ever comes in after me, wants to do work and wants to use the original attachment point, it's there for them to use. So this board is good to go. I've gone ahead and I just powered it up, and I don't have any shorts. My dim bulb's not lighting, so I'm going to go ahead and hook this up to a set of speakers and run some music through it and make sure we're not having any issues and that everything's working accordingly. And from there, I'm not sure where I'm going to move on to, but we're running out of stuff to do, so I think I'll be going to one of the tone boards. And so let me go ahead and test this out for music, and then we'll come back and start on the next board. All right, so I think I'm going to move on to the tone board, and in order to take out this tone board, which is right behind here, I've got to basically take the nuts off of each of these 4 controls. So this is my volume, balance, treble, and bass. And so I've gone ahead and removed those nuts, and this board will just slide out, but it's attached by a few wires. So this actually may be the hardest board in the whole machine to get to, but we'll see. So this thing has, I think, is it 16 electrolytic capacitors and 8 transistors. I'm definitely going to change out all the capacitors. I don't know if I'm going to change out the transistors or not. I haven't decided. Usually I don't change out transistors on the tone board unless there's a problem, but I may get extra motivated and change those out. And let's see, I'm just going to say I'm probably going to change them out just to be on the safe side. This thing sounds great. By the way, I went ahead and powered it up and played some music for it, and so that last transistor sub I did on the rectifier board / power supply worked out great, and so no issues there, no shorts, and so this thing is sounding really, really good. With every step I take, I think it sounds a little bit better. So let me go ahead and get to work on this tone board. At the end of it, I'll report back if there's anything unusual or anything special I had to do, but for now, I'm just going to be plugging and chugging capacitors and transistors. So we'll see you in a few. Okay, so I just got done working on the tone board, and what you see here are some transistors from that tone board. And so remember we talked about transistor rot and that black going up into the silicone? Well, this is, if you ever wonder why that's an issue, this is why. So when I went to replace the transistors on that tone board, I had 3 of them just fall apart. So it was practically a ticking time bomb probably in this unit before this unit was really going to start having some problems. And so I've replaced a lot of these transistors already in this unit. So this has probably been a very good catch to do with this particular unit, but you can see as I started to remove the transistors, the legs here, see, look, 1, 2, 3, 4 legs fell out. This transistor lost 2 legs, this one lost 1 leg, and this one lost 1 leg, and that shouldn't happen. So that, like I said, this was a ticking time bomb in that tone board. Probably what would have happened is we probably would have had sound cut out, lost a channel, maybe some popping, and then it would have just stopped working. There wouldn't have been any sound probably. Either from the left or right channel, or possibly both channels. So I went ahead and replaced all the electrolytic capacitors on the tone board, and I also changed out all the transistors. And while I had that tone board exposed, I went ahead and cleaned those controls as well with my deoxit fader. And so I really like that product. The Fader F5 does a good job. Really, it's the only product I've ever used, and I don't plan on changing, because don't fix it if it ain't broken type mentality. So I just wanted to show you guys why that's such a big problem with this transistor rot. And so, like I said, ticking time bomb in your unit. So if you see this and you know that those transistors are troublesome transistors already, it just pays to go ahead and get them out of the unit. Because what you don't want to have happen is one of these short out, or something happens, or one of these legs fall out and causes a short somewhere else, and then causes a much larger problem in the end. That way we can keep this equipment running and sounding good for a long time. So I'm going to move on. Really not much left to do in this board or this receiver. So I've got I think I only have, not counting the tuner board, I only have 2 capacitors and possibly 4 transistors left to change out. So I'm going to do those, and those are on the push buttons here. Let me zoom out and I'll show you guys. So you can see them there. This is the last board left to do. And so we've got 2 electrolytic capacitors and 4 transistors. And I don't know what transistors these are, but just looking at them, I see the black-legged transistor rod on these as well. So I'm going to pull this board out. I'll probably change all that. And then while I have this disassembled, I will flush all these switches with my deoxit D5. One of these switches, I can't remember which one it is. I want to say it's this, one of the tape switches. When I hit that switch, it drops the right channel. So another thing going on with this unit is, you know, the switches are obviously dirty, and so it's dropping a channel as I go in and out. And so the only way I could get that channel back was to really exercise the switch. So hopefully the D5 will do a good job and clean those switches, and I'll just work them back and forth. And so if you haven't watched other videos on cleaning switches, really what we're going to do is we're going to look for an orifice or hole where I can spray that D5 in it, and then all I'm going to do is really go back and forth working these switches. Probably do 20 or 30 times on each switch. It's very tedious, not the most fun in the world, but has to be done in order to get that cleaner into these switches and break up any carbon that may be on the switches so we don't have problems later down the road. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. I'll pull this board, I'll change out these transistors and electrolytic capacitors, clean out those controls, and then I'll report back after we're done there. All right, so we just did that last board, and I have to say, Frank, if you're listening out there, this one was a pain in the butt. So out of everything I've done so far, working on this board was the worst so far. So I had to unsolder a couple of these wires on this switch, and then it connects to the bottom board through 2 pins. So I unsoldered those pins, and that gave me access to this board to be able to get to do these 4 transistors and 2 electrolytic capacitors. Now, one thing I want to point out, and I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, is that this receiver has 2 types of boards in it. And so you'll see these green boards over here, which are the newer style boards, but you still see these brown boards. And the brown boards are kind of the older style circuit boards. Not a lot going on with them. Still pretty basic. So what I imagine has happened is that this was kind of being built or designed in the process of switching over to these new boards. They still had the old technology. It was probably cheaper to manufacture. And so where they could, they used it. Now, the caveat to that, and I alluded to this earlier, is there's some boards that don't have any markings on them. And so this board here didn't have any markings on it. So don't know where the positive or the negative side of the capacitor would go on according to the board, and the pinout for the transistors had no markings to indicate where to put those transistors at. So I had to be super careful, not so much on the electrolytic capacitors, that's pretty easy, but I had to be super careful on these transistors to ensure that I was putting them in the correct way and making sure I got the pinout correct. So because when you think about it, the old transistors I pulled out were, their pinout were BCE, and all these new ones are ECB. So basically everything had to be done kind of backwards to ensure that I got these. But I've tested it, it sounds good, so this is all right, everything's working. That one switch that was cutting out, you know, I cleaned all these switches while I had them out, and so now that issue is resolved as well. So not a lot left to do this unit. The only thing left really is there's a couple LED lights that I still need to replace, and then the tuner board, we need to check on the FM alignment on that board. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video here, because I'll probably do, if the FM alignment is out of whack, I'll do a separate video on probably talking about the FM alignment. But for the most part, you guys have seen me walk through and rebuild pretty much every board on this receiver. This thing sounds amazing. I'm probably going to have to get me one of these. It's a cool little unit, and honestly, it's been a very, very easy unit to work on overall. And so serviceability, I give it 2 thumbs up on serviceability. It's been a pleasure to work on this thing so far. Now, I may think differently once I get into the FM side of things, but for now, everything else has been great. So this board, this unit now has had pretty much minus the tuner board, this unit has had every transistor and every electrolytic capacitor replaced. And it's a good thing. We talked about the transistor rod on a lot of those transistors, and I found several capacitors that were definitely way out of spec. And had either low or high capacitance greater than the 20% tolerance, or the ESR was really high. So very good thing that we serviced this unit. So I appreciate everybody watching. I hope this was helpful for anybody who's working on one of these units, these 730 twins. And if you have questions, make sure to leave them down in the comments below. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.
All right, so I know I said that last clip I was going to end the video there, but I decided to go ahead and bring you back on the bench and let you guys see what it looks like so far and review what we've done. And so everything cosmetically has been done, but you notice we don't have a case yet. And so that's because I'm going to be building a custom case for this thing. And I'm actually pretty excited about it because I'm going to add a piece or do something that I don't think has ever been done in a case before. And I think that'll really tie this together and make it really look pretty awesome. And so the front of this looks amazing. It sounds amazing. And so I'm really impressed with the small footprint of this receiver on how much of a big sound it really puts out. And so if you ever get a chance to get one of these, get one, because you will not be disappointed. And so let's review what we've done to this. So we've gone ahead and rebuilt the amp board with all new electrolytic capacitors and transistors. We left the original output transistors because they were fine. We did retouch the thermal paste and the sill pads on that and mount it back to the heatsink. We've also went ahead and done the phono, their EQ board, and we've changed out all the electrolytic capacitors and transistors on there. We went to the sub-rectifier board, which is really an extension of the power supply. We changed out all the electrolytic capacitors there, and there was that one transistor that we mounted to the frame, and really it's a big upgrade. I don't know if it was necessary, but because of the pinout of the transistors that I had, it was necessary for us to do that while keeping the original heatsink there. So if anybody comes in behind me and wants to change it up, they can, but it's definitely going to last the tail of time for that one. From there, we moved to the tone control board, and we basically changed all the transistors and electrolytic capacitors on that board. There was a switch board as well that had some transistors and a couple electrolytic capacitors. We've changed all those out. And then on the tuner board, I went ahead and just changed out the electrolytic capacitors. I didn't change out the transistors there because there's like 23 transistors on there, and everything was working really well on that tuner board, so I just left it alone. I was going to do an FM alignment on this thing, but it's spot on, and it's picking up channels really well. The stereo circuit and the muting circuit is working perfectly fine, and so I left that alone. From there, I worked on the lighting, and so I changed all the lights to LEDs, including the indicator and the dial indicator light, because that was burned out, so I upgraded that to an LED. And then also the stereo power on button, I put a new LED. Unlike the 930, this one doesn't have any indicator lights to let you know whether you're on auxiliary 1 or 2 or phono 1 or 2 or FM or AM. And so that's something I kind of wish it has, but this particular unit doesn't have it. But if it did, I would have upgraded those LEDs as well. From there, I moved on and I just set the idle current and made sure that was within manufacturer spec. And so I think the manufacturer wants you to be about 35 millivolts plus or minus 5 millivolts. And so I think I put mine both at around 33 millivolts. And I always like to be just slightly under what the manufacturer says. But this thing is looking good and sounding really good. And so I'm going to end the video here, and we'll start another video, and I'm going to show you guys how I build the case on this one. And I think that'll be pretty cool, and you guys will be able to see that feature that I do. And then probably at the end of it, I'll do like a wrap-up video and show you guys. And that may be the same video when I do the case. I'm not sure, but it may be a separate video as well. But I'm very impressed with the stereo. It's going to turn out really good, and I think the owner is going to be really impressed with the case, because I haven't told them what I'm going to do with it, but I can't imagine this is going to be very unique. I mean, it's not going to be like over the top unique, like nothing crazy, but I just think what I'm going to do is just going to give it that little bit that's really going to make it look nice. And so tune into that video. Stay tuned. That'll be coming out. And so I appreciate everybody that's already subscribed to the channel. If you haven't, please take the time to subscribe and turn your notification bell on. That way you get notified when there's good content. If there's content you guys want to see or the suggestions, please feel free to leave them out in the comments below. I'm kind of just doing my own thing here, and if you like it, great. If you don't, help me get better. And so, but as always, I appreciate everybody that watches, and we'll see you on the next video.